SUAANGAN,
Welcome again to SUAANGAN. I'm Stan Rubin. Tonight is the second part to our 500 Lakes program with archaeologist from Ottawa, David Morrison. He continues his explanation of the site the Inuvialuit traditionally used as a camping ground. Here they hunted and fished most of the year, always living off the land. Producer Debbie Gordon-Rubin and Tommy Smith were there. Here's David Morrison taking you on a walkthrough.
We got a whole bunch of these last year, and I expect when we get down on the house floor some more, we'll find a lot more fishing stuff here. Caribou hunting equipment, we usually get quite a bit of that too. Bow and arrow, and lances, spears, and so on. Gary here in this square here picked up a very nice chipstone spear point about this long. It'd be used for hunting caribou probably out of a kayak, where you paddle up alongside the caribou and stab them when they're crossing the water. Down here we don't get too much, but up on the coast you usually get a lot of seal hunting and beluga hunting, harpoon stuff, harpoon heads, foreshaft, all the parts of a harpoon except for the wooden shaft, and even sometimes you get the wooden shaft. Mouthpieces for floats, all of that kind of stuff. Boat parts. Last summer we got 3 or 4 Comatic runners, almost the whole front part, perhaps this long, the turning up part at the front. All kinds of stuff. Because we're in the north, because we're in the Arctic, the organic preservation is really good. Things don't rot, or they rot very slowly. So you get all the wood artifacts, you get the bone is in perfect shape. In some sites, at least toward the bottom of the site where it's permanently frozen, until we come along and dig it up, you find skin clothing, parts of skin clothing. Whole parkas. I know a fellow working in the high Arctic who got a whole caribou skin coat with the hood, and there's a little stone set in the front of the hood like an amulet thing. Finding boots and so on is quite common, boots frozen in. Here, where the organic preservation isn't as good as further north, there's quite a big thaw here in the summer. So the wood in the top foot or so tends to be quite rotten and punky. And I don't imagine we'll get any skin clothing here. It's just not cold enough. We do run into permanently frozen ground. When we get down about this deep, we start running into frost. But as we clear it off, it thaws because we take the insulation off the top of it. So you get about this much, 3 or 4 inches thaw every day. And we haven't had any real problem in this site with permafrost at all. We've only encountered it a few times, and then by the time you come back the next day, it's all gone. So this site has been quite easy to dig that way.
So everything you find, you write down and grid and...
Yeah, we try to keep very good maps and keep exactly clear where everything is. We take a lot of photographs of where things are and what the bottom of level 1 in this square looks like, for instance. We can put them all together. It would be handy if we had a little more helicopter time to get a helicopter in here and have them fly about 40 feet above the site and shoot photographs straight down. But we haven't got the budget to bring a helicopter down here just for that right now. After we work here this summer, we're going up to Harrowby Bay, to the old Horton River channel, and we're going to be doing some survey work out of there. And that's so far from Tuck that it'll use up all of our helicopter time, so we just don't have any access. It'll be interesting over there, the site we're looking at there. We found a bison skull on the ground surface. When we were there, I was there in '87 with another fellow who'd already found the site, and he took me back to show it to me. And we flipped over this bone we saw in the ground, we turned it over, and it was the skull of a bison, like a buffalo. And beside it was a muskox skull.
Kind of far out of his range?
Way out of his range. The nearest bison now lives down around Fort Smith. What he was doing up here, I haven't a clue. They got a radiocarbon date on this bison, and it's 500 years old. It's a wood bison, so it's the same kind of bison that lives around Fort Smith. rather than the kind that live on the Great Plains. That's what you'd expect. And there's other bison bones from around Cape Bathurst, not that recent, but only a few thousand years old. So there was probably a little relic herd of bison up there for a long time. And this is the most recent occurrence of it, so I'm going to go take a look at that site and see if we can find any more bison bone. Any evidence that the Inuvialuit people were hunting bison, which would be very interesting because it's so bizarre to think about.
Yeah.
So we'll only be here for another week or 10 days to finish this site up.
So how do you judge how long you stay? Is it standard?
No, that's all the time we can afford this year. So that's sort of what sets it. It's set by outside. Otherwise, I mean, we could easily dig here for the next 5 or 10 years if we wanted to dig all the houses, for instance. And we probably will not be entirely finished this house when we leave. We also have to spend the last day or two moving our pile of dirt back into the holes. We have to fill up everything we do and try to leave the area looking as much like we've never been here as we can, so that we don't leave a mess. It's important that we backfill the site. It's the worst day of the summer, though, because it's very hard work, hauling buckets of dirt back and forth all day and filling up all the holes you've so laboriously dug all summer. But it's very bad manners not to.
Could you do a little bit more trawling?
Okay. You could pan in on this. Oh, there's the goodie. Okay. You want me to hold the spear point?
Sure.
Okay, that spear point I mentioned that Gary found over here, this is what it looks like. It's made out of a hard, shiny kind of stone that breaks a lot like glass. And it's chipped into shape. This is the part that would have been in the wooden handle, like that, in the spear shaft, and this is the part that sticks out. It would work like that. It might also be a knife. It's very hard to tell a knife blade from a spear blade. This again is the kind of thing that makes me think this site is early, that they're still using stone tools. Stone tools work very well. You can get stone flakes are sharper than steel, but they're a lot of work to make. Yeah. It requires a lot of craftsmanship to make something like this.
How long do you think it would take to make something?
I know people who are pretty good at making stone tools who could make this, for instance, and they could do this in 45 minutes. Something like that.
I had a lot of time then.
They had a lot of time in them. They had the same amount of time as we do now, 24 hours a day, but they didn't play gin in the evenings.
Did you find out any games or anything like that?
We haven't found anything here, but I have in other sites. The most common game to find probably is a game in the Eastern Arctic it's called Ajigak. And I think it's played everywhere there are Inuit. It's, you take usually the humerus, the upper arm bone of a seal, a bearded seal if you can, so it's pretty big. And you tie a string around it, and you have a pointy stick tied to the end of the string, and you drill holes in the humerus. And it's a cup and pin game where you toss the humerus up in the air and catch the stick in the hole, which is practically impossible unless you're born to it. Other games, we sometimes find little tiny ivory birds, carved ivory birds. That at least 150 years ago in Baffin Island, people were still using little birds carved like that to almost like a dice game where you'd throw them and bet on which side came up and things like that. I don't know how the game worked exactly. Cat's Cradle would be a really common game, and of course you never dig that up. It's just running caribou.
Oh yeah. I have string games.
Yeah, string games. But we got no evidence of that. So that's about it for games, really. You don't usually get a lot of that. I think for games back then, I think in the evening, people very often just worked. The men would work repairing their hunting equipment or making stuff, and the women would sew. Spend most of the time sewing, I bet. Didn't it? People worked pretty hard back then.
Yeah.
The Inuvialuit land claim, the last few years, everything that all archaeologists dig up on Inuvialuit land is now owned by the Inuvialuit. So I worked for a museum, and until a few years ago, everything I dug up belonged to the museum because it is the Canadian National Museum, and so in a way all the people of Canada owned it. But now anything on Inuvialuit land is owned specifically by the Inuvialuit. And I get 2 years to study it and then it comes back. So,
What happens to it?
well, right now there's nowhere in the Delta, no facilities to store it. It has to be stored under controlled environment. Some of the wooden things, for instance, are very delicate and so on, and it has to have controlled atmosphere. It has to also have security. A lot of sort of informal museums in the north, not real ones, but sort of community things, after 2 years they burn down some night and everything's gone, or stuff gets stolen. I mean, you need a proper museum with security guards and full-time staff and so on. This is, of course, extremely expensive and hard to set up, but without one in the Delta, all of my stuff is temporarily stored in the museum in Yellowknife at the Prince of Wales, and it's just there held in trust. But it doesn't do the Inuvialuit people any good if it's in a box in Yellowknife. It would be very nice to see, it'd be very difficult to do, but it'd be very nice to see a museum open up in Inuvik or Tuk or wherever, so that at least some of this stuff could go on display and that people could actually see on display and properly looked after the tools that their ancestors used to live on the land. Otherwise, in a way, we should never bother to dig it up, because if no one sees it and it stays in a box, then it doesn't educate anyone.
Are they cured while they're sitting in the box? Or how?
Well, right now the museum curates all the fragile things. So even though my museum doesn't own this stuff anymore, they're still willing to look after it properly. If we found any skin clothing in here, certainly all the wood artifacts too, or any metal we got, it has to be stabilized so that it won't fall apart. The wood, for instance, it may look fine in the ground, but when it's been out of the ground for a couple of weeks, it just starts to fall apart. It dries up, you get fungus infections in it, mold grows on it. It'll fall apart unless it's looked after properly. So we take it back, and we have technicians in Ottawa who do all kinds of fancy chemical treatments on this stuff, so that it doesn't just disappear. This is also an expensive process, though, and it would be something that any kind of an Inuvialuit museum would have to do as well. It requires a certain amount of equipment and a certain amount of expertise. Otherwise, you're just going to lose some of the stuff. It's just going to fall apart. A lot of the stuff we dig up doesn't need to be conserved, particularly. A lot of the antler tools and stone tools and things, or the pottery and so on. Even the animal bones are usually in such good shape that they'll last forever. But as I say, the wood is usually pretty fragile. See, I'm getting fish bones in here. Lots of little ribs. You could go crazy picking up all the fish bones on this floor.
Do you clean all of that?
Yeah, I don't do it, but we have technicians again in Ottawa who clean this stuff and catalog it when we get back so that we know where everything came from. And we've had on the last winter on contract a person who's a specialist in fish bones. Where we were working last year was a lot of fish, and she has identified all of the fish bone we dug up last year, which was 25,000 fish bones. She spent the whole winter not just counting them, but figuring out what species they are and how many individual fish could have produced that many bones. Oh, very nice. Yes, beautiful. Gary here just found a piece of pottery. It's the top part of the bowl. You can see the rim here, so they call it a rim sherd, for probably a cooking pot from the shape of it. The lamps tended to be sort of like saucer shaped, round and saucer shaped, but this is probably for a cooking pot.
So the pottery they made lasted very well under heat and stuff like that?
Yeah, it wouldn't, it almost certainly would, you'd have to do stone boiling with it though. It would be the kind of, it's almost impossible to make pottery without kilns and so on that you can actually put over a flame. So this pottery, I'm only guessing, I've never tried, but I would be very surprised if this pottery, if the pot could have been suspended over a flame the way you could a metal pot, or a soapstone pot will work that way too. They might have had to stone boil, which means you get round stones, put them in the fire, and you get them red hot, and then pick them up with tongs and put them in the water and make the water boil that way through indirect heat rather than putting it right over a fire.
Oh, yeah.
It works very well, I'm told, but you can get water boiling very quickly that way. But That's a nice one.
I could be associated with the hearth too.
It's right up on top of it, isn't it? Right on the edge and just above.
Yeah, and close to it.
So how beneficial for like students who are in schools or finishing schools would it be for them to start like furthering their education and going into stuff like archaeology or, like you say, technicians to do certain things?
There would be a tremendous desire on the part of museums and so on to hire native people who had skills in this regard. What we're digging up is native history, and it occasionally gets embarrassing, the fact that there are so few native people involved in it. It would be, native people need to take over their own history, and the way to do that is to become experts and to know how to do all of this stuff. Native archaeologists, native lab technicians and conservators would I imagine, get hired very, very quickly, because there's a tremendous need for this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. It would require, it normally requires a fair amount of schooling. Archaeology in particular requires a lot of university, but it's coming more and more. There are more and more people involved, and in the future it'll happen. Mm-hmm. Try to talk Rita into it here.
Yeah. So would that be a piece of a plate too, or something like that?
This? Or this?
I mean, that's a stone.
Oh, probably not. You do get plates, but they're always made out of wood.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. Nice carved plates and bowls and things out of wood. Beautiful stuff. One reason I particularly like doing Inuit or Inuvialuit archaeology is because the artifacts are beautiful. It's the workmanship is always really good. It's great stuff. Mm-hmm. The carpentry work, the woodworking is often incredibly good on us. You know, it's all little things, but beautiful joinery, really fancy stuff. It's a pleasure to dig it up.
Any similarities with a culture from somewhere far, far away?
Well, yeah, in a way, all Inuit archaeology, all Inuit cultures, all the kinds of tools they use and so on, all the way from Siberia to Greenland. Mm-hmm. There are regional variations, like Inuvialuit culture, for instance, but the whole thing together makes a unit. Inuit stuff in general is very similar to each other and quite different from anything else. You can easily tell Inuit stuff from Indian stuff, for instance. It's a very distinctive technology. With one of the things that's distinctive about Inuit, traditional Inuit tools and stuff is how many they had. I mean, there's a tool for everything. So you can dig a site like this and find 150 different kinds of tools. Where you dig most other cultures, most other kinds of places in the world, you're just not going to find that many kinds of things. You know, it makes it very interesting. They got a thing for everything. And many tools are quite complicated. So you find all the different little parts of this, you know, and parts of that. It makes it kind of fun to figure out. Mm-hmm. Where, I don't know, you dig a lot of other places and you just, the technology isn't that interesting. Or I don't find it so anyway. Complex people. Well, this would be one reason why Inuvialuit or Inuit people need to know about their heritage, is to see how much there is in their past, how much they got to be proud of, how much, you know, what amazing things their ancestors did, you know, and how clever they were to live on the land as well as they did. Mm-hmm. Usually in quite a lot of comfort, you know. Life in the old days, it's often said to have been, you know, really hard and people went hungry, and that was true sometimes, but there was a lot of good about it too, and a lot of that was just that people were really smart at solving problems. So and we can look at the way they solve those problems. How do you kill a seal when you can't even see it, you know, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it's fun. It's fun to sort it all out now as far as we can, hundreds of years later, and try to figure out what happened.
So do you do any of the writing of what you find yourself?
Yeah, I write articles in scientific publications, scientific journals. I write books. Most of what I write has been aimed at other archaeologists or you know, kind of specialized scientific audience. But I'm more and more trying to write popular things for people who aren't archaeologists but who are interested in this kind of stuff. I have an exhibition that will be opening at the museum in Ottawa in a year on Inuit history. And I think this is a real challenge, is trying to explain the cultural heritage of Inuit people clearly and fairly to people who don't know a lot of, who are not archaeologists. So you can't just sort of use the buzzwords for it, With other archaeologists, you can almost talk in shorthand. But to explain it to people who don't know don't have the big background in it, and yet get it all across is quite a challenge.
In simple language.
Yeah, in simple language, but trying to get basically kind of complicated ideas across in simple language is quite a challenge.
Okay, well, here's the snow knife we got yesterday afternoon. I got the tag on it. It's not in the best shape. It was found right under this great huge hearth here. So one end of it's a little bit burnt. The other end's gone a bit rotten. But it's a classic style for a snow knife. Hmm? The two holes here would have held some kind of a binding that would have gone around the handle to make the grip better. It would have been a little longer. The end of it's a bit rotted off. You can see how it would work. It's made out of whalebone by the looks of it. I have it in this plastic bag because I don't want it to dry out too much. The end might fall apart a bit more. Carbon-14 is an unstable isotope of carbon-13, which is the usual carbon that's everywhere in the world. And when you're alive, you absorb, along with the carbon-13, a certain amount of carbon-14, which is radioactive. It doesn't hurt you, but it slowly breaks down. I think it turns back into carbon-13. And by measuring the ratio of carbon-13 and carbon-14 in something that was alive, you can tell within certain limits how long ago it died. So that's what radiocarbon dating is. It, in my experience, doesn't work screamingly well in the Arctic with wood and stuff, because you're often dealing with driftwood or trees that have died a long time ago. So what we're trying to date is this fire, but we're actually dating when this tree died, which isn't necessarily quite the same thing. As soon as you die, you stop absorbing carbon-14 and you stop absorbing everything. And so what we're actually dating is the death of the tree, and assuming that it's close to the time that the tree was burnt in this fire, but it isn't necessarily so. So often carbon-14 dates are not very good. But they help us when you get enough dates. You kind of get a general consensus on how old something might be. Mm-hmm. Also date caribou bone quite a lot, because then there's probably a much closer relationship between when the caribou died and when the bones were put in the site, because people don't pick up 200-year-old caribou bones and bring them back to the site, But wood is chancy, but I thought I'd just take a wood sample just to run it and see what I get. No, not really. This is just a rib. It looks like it's been chopped through or something, but I just throw it in the bone bag. Yeah, I was just wondering if I could see. Yeah. No, there's no conceivable tool making use for ribs. Sea mammal ribs are sometimes used for fishing reels. You wrap the line around it, and you can even use it like a little, like a rod for jigging. But they're quite a bit heavier and thicker. All right.
Okay.
All right. Well, yeah,
Bennett is anyway.
You should go to about there.
Yeah, I just wanted to check if I might find anything else.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
It looks like sterile gravel, doesn't it? Looks like nobody's ever done anything to that. There's probably your original ground surface.
Where? But
right there.
yeah. This is underneath.
So this thing here would have been sitting right on the original ground.
Yeah. two.
Probably this dark line right here. This. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so I'll just map these in.
Yeah, and you can just leave them then. You're not gonna dig here anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, just do this half.
Okay. Good enough.
Push everything there, so. Push everything there, so.
My rock back. Oh, I can't see nothing with this light shining on this net. I'll make a note of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And a different map for the rest.
Sure, yes, I think. Caribou metapodial, these are metatarsals. This is the lower limb bone on a caribou on the back. And they cut them like this. Split them this way, and then what you do is you split them again and you use this ridge here to make tools on. Make, we found a whole bunch of marrow spoons made out of that here. And make arrowheads there, or you can make barbed fish spear points, things like that, out of this ridge of bone. So they're cutting up caribou leg bone. That's one of the most common things we're finding here. I guess. Cut up bones. This is a big fireplace.
When it's a little bit less wind, we'll let you go through this, Professor?
Sorry?
When it's less wind, we'll let you go through this, how do we call it, this big Professor?
Yeah, it's pretty bad, eh?
Okay, I got 20 questions.
M. Okay, living?
Yeah.
Maroon.
No, it's green.
Male?
Yeah.
North American?
Yeah.
Canadian? American?
Yeah.
Entertainer?
Nope.
Politician.
Nope.
What's going on?
Hard
There's
side.
rocks all over the place and lots of bits of
Social
wood
science.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Roots and some burns too. And,
Archaeology?
and there's a hole here. There's lots of hole all over. It's, that's from animals? You got it?
Hard.
I don't know. Maybe it was a cache or something. I don't know.
Living archaeology.
I didn't know. When I'll be down at that level, then I'm going to try to see what's in there.
Archaeology.
But,
Work in the Arctic.
I don't know. It's like here, it's a
You
piece
got
of
an
antler.
ethnic,
Lots
first
of
name
cat
which
antler
reveals
too.
an ethnic origin.
Almost no artifacts.
Oh,
It's his nickname.
Just
Yes.
Nickname.
Yes, he does.
bones.
You ever
And,
work around here?